Ooh, that smells hoppy.
Hello, everybody.
Back to the abyss. We got beer this week, so we're going to be tolerable again for all those who unsubscribed last week.
I'm just looking at it with a smile on my face. What's the beer called?
It's called Fuck If I Know.
9% double IPA.
From Red Rock.
And we're going to take a sip.
I think it's called Fucafino. I don't know, but I like to say Fuck If I Know.
Oh, Lord. Have you had that before?
I have not.
Ooh.
Your face tells me all I need to know. It's pretty hoppy then, right?
It's not hoppy. It's, I don't know.
Do you like
the
it?
second taste wasn't that bad. That's strange.
So the first taste.
It punched me the first time. Second sip was actually really good. Do a second sip.
The first one's fine.
No, do a second one. It's better. Was it better?
Fuck if I know.
Fuck you.
Yeah, it's good. I actually like it. I can see what you said though. It's pretty punches your palate for a minute.
But it's weird after the second sip. It just tastes fine. It's weird.
Well, it's because we've had what did we have last week? We didn't have anything last week. The week before was like a lager or something. I don't remember. Fuck if I know.
It's like that Futurama episode where Bender points the thing at Fry's nuts. It's like some detection gun thing, and he's like, "Ow, my balls!" And then he goes back a second time. He's like, "I didn't feel anything that time."
Yeah, that's what this is. It's like a kick in the nuts first, and then it's gone after.
What does that mean? I don't know.
Speaking of alcohol, though, I've got a really cool story.
Okay.
So, have you heard of the Utah DABC, the lottery that they do?
The lottery?
Yeah, it's like the rare import lottery for alcohol.
Yeah, I think I have, actually, yeah.
So I didn't know what it was, and our good friend Curtis was like, hey, they're doing this thing. They've got some bourbons that you can enter in to win. You don't win it. You get to win the option of buying a bottle. So it's like, okay, but it's like rare imports. So I put my name in, and on the website it tells you it's a 0.02 something % chance of winning. Like this high-end bourbon. So I put my name in, didn't think anything of it. Well, I won. They emailed me
that's
hey.
the picture you sent me. Okay.
Yeah. So I didn't look, and this is so far beyond my taste. I don't know what the fuck I got. I'm just like, okay, cool. I'll go get that. So as I get to the liquor store, they make the manager come out. He has a clipboard. He takes my ID. He's making sure it's actually me. He goes and gets an individual box, it's a tiny little box, individually packaged, opens it up, and he's holding this thing. He's like, dude, this is like the white whale. He's like, I've never seen a bottle in person in my life. And he's holding it up. He's like, look at the color. So it's called Pappy Van Winkle 12. It's a 12-year bourbon.
How much was it? That's what I need to know.
So I Googled it because I wasn't sure what it was. The cheapest bottle I could find was $1,000.
How much did you?
I paid about 10% of that.
So is it discounted too?
Yeah. Well, I think so. Here's the thing. From my understanding, we have
a liquor lottery.
Yeah, the MSRP of the value of it is 100 or 200 from my understanding, but you can't get it from you can't walk in the liquor store and buy it. You have to get it from private sellers and everything, and they list it for thousands of dollars.
You know what I would have done? I would have been like, hey, do you want some? And he's like, yeah. Hang on, let me take the first sip and just down the whole thing right in front of him.
I bet you would have.
Yeah. Just hang on, let me just take a sip real quick.
My one chance in life in a lottery, I won a whiskey bottle. I couldn't have won the Powerball or something. But I haven't opened it yet. I'm going to save it for an occasion and open it, and I think we should try a little bit on the show at some point.
I'm always down.
I'll give you a little sip. So yeah, that was pretty cool. And I also went to a concert this week. Nothing But Thieves. Really good. They're from the UK. But I also watched something so stupid. It's called No One Will Save You, and it was on Hulu. Oh my God, biggest steaming pile of shit movie ever. In fact, I want you to watch it because I have this feeling you're going to be like, it was great.
I don't want to physically get mad. I mean,
it was so bad. And the thing is the first 15 minutes was incredible. It was genuinely scary. It was creepy. It was unnerving. The trailer made it seem so cool. And by the end of it, I'm like, what the fuck did I watch? It was horrible. So I think you should check it out because I am genuinely curious of your thoughts on it. Because you and I are we're pretty divisive.
We're pretty opposite in what we like. It seems like. So remember, you just like really shitty shows.
Okay.
I was watching The Boys on Prime.
Actually. I love that show.
That because it's literally
what would actually happen.
I only liked the first couple of seasons. I think season 3 was kind of shit. It's what Marvel should be. Marvel's so squeaky clean and annoying now that I can't watch anything from them. I hate Marvel. DC, I'm always I wish this was.
You should watch the new Batman one. It's so dark and gritty.
I really like The Boys. I think they did a good job in season 1 and 2 on just being a dark ass. I mean, it wasn't like too like on the nose dark, but it was a pretty dark superhero film.
Did you watch the Hero-gasm episode?
Yeah, I saw that one.
They had the huge disclaimer, like, you're about to see some shit that's pretty gnarly. Man. I was like, okay. Yeah, so it's been a pretty fun week, I'll say, other than No One Will Save You. But we're back to talk about some more serial killers. Episode 5. So this week we're covering Maryland, Massachusetts, Michigan, Minnesota, and Mississippi. So we're halfway done after this one. It's a halfway point of all the states. So I'm going to kick it off with Maryland with someone named Melvin Reese. Melvin David Reese was an American serial killer who was responsible for the deaths of 5 individuals in Maryland and Virginia between 1957 and 1959. Between the torture and sexual assault prior to the actual killings, it's safe to say this man was a monster. So let's jump into Maryland's most notorious serial killer. Interestingly, not much is known about his childhood or upbringing. He's kind of like, I don't know where he came from. Several rumors state that he may have been born in the UK, eventually being disowned and sent away to live in America at a very young age. He went to Edwards Military Institute in Salem, North Carolina, and Woodward School for Boys in Washington, D.C., before graduating from Hyattsville High School in Maryland. He entered the Army in October 1946 as a military musician, which I didn't know was a thing.
It makes sense, because you got to have some type of art in the military or some type of entertainment.
It caught me off guard. I didn't realize it. But it's also crazy how many serial killers have been in the Army or the Navy. It seems to be a pretty common thing,
though, because if you want to murder somebody and use your impulses for quotations
good.
I guess you would do that. It's the same reason why they go into trucking. You go pick someone up in your rig and you drive to some.
I was waiting for where's this going, Cleet? You just want to. Anyway, so a military musician in Europe before being discharged in 1953. Also, a lot of discharges from serial killers. He attended a few more schools upon returning to the U.S., where classmates recalled him being a talented musician, especially with the saxophone, piano, and clarinet. Melvin dropped out of UMD, University of Maryland, before he could graduate in an effort to pursue his musical career, traveling around the D.C. area to play at local jazz clubs. He married a UMD student named Elaine Rachmaninoff in July 1954, and they had a son named Philip. But sadly, the marriage only lasted 5 years. She probably got out at a good time, though.
Yeah.
Sure. Kind of like your wife.
Excuse me?
Got out at a good time. Your first wife. Because you would have murdered her anyway.
Really? Is that where we're going with?
I don't know.
Am I a serial killer, Britton?
I don't know, Cleet. If you are, you're really good because you haven't been caught. I've seen your cement room, though.
No one. You're lucky to get.
No one gets out of there.
Yeah.
He's like, you're one of the rare few to see it and actually live.
Why do you have that saw Muppet?
In a chair in there?
I don't know.
Cleet, why are you shutting the door? Cleet! Ah! Reese was arrested in 1955 with charges of assaulting an unidentified 36-year-old woman. Reese attempted to force the woman into his car, but luckily she was able to escape. Shockingly, the victim did not press any charges, and the case against Reese was dropped. By the year 1959, Reese was living in Hyattsville, Maryland with actress and topless dancer Pat Barrington, who later was identified in press reports as his wife. They eventually moved to West Memphis, Arkansas, where Reese took a temporary job in a piano shop. It was here in Arkansas that Reese was apprehended on June 24th, 1960. This is where the murders come in. On June 26, 1957, Margaret Harold and her boyfriend, who was a U.S. Army sergeant on a weekend leave, had been traveling near Annapolis, Maryland, when Reese forced them off the road in his green Chrysler. He got out of the car and asked that the couple roll down their windows, flashing his nickel-plated .38 revolver. He demanded that they give him cigarettes and money, and when they refused, Reese shot Margaret in the face point blank.
Oh my God.
Yeah, over cigarettes and money, dude.
I need my Marlboro Reds.
Her boyfriend rushed out of the car through several rural fields in a panic, finally finding a farmhouse where he dialed the police. Police picked him up from the house while others arrived at the scene to find that Reese had stripped Margaret of her clothing and had sexually assaulted her. A search was conducted of the area for the then unidentified Reese. They discovered a cinder block building with a basement window that had been broken out. The police were shocked at what they had found inside. a collection of violent pornographic images, along with autopsy photos of female corpses that had been taped all over the walls. Along with the pictures, they found a yearbook photo of Wanda Tipton, who had graduated from UMD in 1945. They contacted Tipton to ask her about a tall, dark-haired man that the soldier described to the police, to which she denied knowing anyone that fit that description.
But she
knew. Be suspicious.
But she knew.
No one will know. Due to the lack of leads and primitive nature of forensic science back then, the murder became a cold case. That is, until Reese killed again a couple years later. On January 11th, 1959, the Jackson family, consisting of Carol Jackson, his wife Mildred, and their children, 5-year-old Susan and 18-month-old Janet, disappeared shortly after visiting relatives in the Apple Grove area. The Jacksons were described as a normal family with no apparent enemies, which made the disappearance even more concerning. A female relative of the Jacksons, who was also headed home from the same reunion, happened to come across Carol Jackson's car that had been abandoned on the side of the road. She called police, who arrived at the scene to conduct an investigation. There were no signs of any struggle, and a large search effort was called in hopes of finding the missing family. Sadly, it was unsuccessful.
If the police asked you if you had enemies, what would you say?
It's kind of a hard one. Like,
do you have any enemies?
It's like, well, I mean, I yelled at a cashier once. They might not like me. It's like the cashier at the Smiths we were at buying beer by your house, man.
Yeah, man. I don't know what.
He's like walking around fixing machines, doing a little jig to everybody. It's like
he looked at me weird.
It's like, who are you, Colonel Sanders? He was weird. I got weird feelings.
Oh, Lord, do I have enemies?
It's like, man, where do you want me to start? Everyone hates me. Roughly 2 months later, on March 4th, 2 men had been gathering brush near Fredericksburg and stumbled upon the decomposing body of Carol Jackson in a ditch. His hands had been tied behind his back, and he had been shot in the back of the head. When police arrived, they discovered that Jackson had been thrown over the body of his 18-month-old Janet, later being determined that the child had been alive in the ditch before her father was thrown on top of her, to which she suffocated under his weight. That pisses me off. On March 21st, the bodies of Susan and Mildred were found in a forest near Annapolis, both of which showed signs of torture and pre-mortem sexual assault. Not too long after the disappearance of the Jackson family, a local couple reported a frightening experience with a tall, dark-haired man that same afternoon. He had driven behind them and then around them in a blue, older model Chevrolet, all the while flashing his headlights and forcing them off of the road. They reported the man getting out of his car and menacingly approaching the vehicle.
He approached me.
Menacingly. For fear of their lives, they were able to put the car into reverse and escape any damage from the psychopath. Once Mildred and Susan's bodies were found, detectives found the same cinderblock building containing all the gruesome pictures. Inside the building was a red button that was missing from Mildred's dress, which indicated that her presence was there after being kidnapped. They discovered a set of fresh tire marks near the building as well. With all the similarities in the killings and the same area being used, they determined they were after the same culprit. Man, you think? The investigation quickly became a media sensation after a self-proclaimed psychic by the name of Peter Herkos got involved. Ooh. He's like, I know what's going on. He had visited the gravesite of the Jackson family in Falls Church, Virginia, handling their possessions and using his powers to describe the murders based on where their bodies were found. He visited the site of Margaret's murder and confirmed it was the same man responsible. He made some claims about the case itself, stating that it would be solved within the next 2 weeks, with the killer being indicted for murder. He's like, I don't know who it is, but you'll find him in 2 weeks' time. He led investigators to the house of a main suspect who was a trash collector who confessed to the murders. This was later ridiculed by the Washington Post when Reese was actually apprehended. An anonymous letter was sent to the Fredericksburg authorities by a man later identified as Glenn Moser of Norfolk, Virginia, suggesting that they look into Reese. Moser described having heady philosophical conversations before on the subject of murder and whether or not it would be considered acceptable. Imagine having a drink with someone do you think murder's okay?
What if you just murder random people for fun?
That's good, right?
They don't live anyways. People are unhappy.
It's all a simulation.
They live quiet lives of desperation.
Exactly. Reese at the time was under the influence of Benzedrine and told Moser that he considered murder to be simply another part of the human experience, and he eagerly wanted to take part in it. He's like, I just want to take the human experience for all it's worth. Murder is part of it. He supposedly told Moser, you can't say it's wrong to kill. Only individual standards make it right or wrong.
Don't knock it if you haven't tried it.
It's kind of what it sounds like. He's like, you can't tell me it's wrong. Only you can feel like it's wrong. I don't. I think it's acceptable. The conversation took place before the Jackson family disappearance, and when hearing of the murders a few months later, Moser immediately suspected Reese had involvement, and even went as far as confronting Reese about them. Reese didn't confess to Moser, but also didn't deny responsibility, ultimately becoming evasive. Authorities followed up on this lead, hoping to question Reese, found that he had moved out of his home, leaving no forwarding address. Not suspicious. They did a sweep of local jazz clubs where he was known to have performed, with no avail. They ran a background check, finding his enrollment at UMD and his relationship with Wanda Tipton. Remember Wanda Tipton, the yearbook picture?
Tipton.
Their person of interest in the Margaret Herald investigation. They questioned Tipton some more after this discovery, to which she finally admitted to having a relationship with him, but had broken it off as Reese claimed to be married. Moser came forward personally in 1960, telling authorities that Reese had contacted him and that they could find him at a music store in West Memphis, Arkansas. Reese was arrested and his house was searched, yielding notes describing the Jackson family's murders, and the man who witnessed Margaret's killing identified him as the one that they had been looking for the whole time. Reese was convicted by the state of Maryland of Harold's murder and sentenced to life in prison. Virginia added a death sentence for the other 4 murders, although it was changed to life in 1972. Reese died in prison in 1995. Investigators had suspicions that Reese had also been involved with 4 other homicides in the area around UMD. The teenagers Mary Chamette, Michael Ann Ryan, Mary Fellers, and Shelby Venable were all found to have been raped and killed in separate incidents, although Reese was never charged with any of them.
Little known fact, before he went to jail, he invented the peanut butter cup.
Yeah, that's true. Reese's. So every time you eat Reese's, you're kind of... Never mind.
Supporting a serial killer.
So now where are we going?
Massachusetts. This one is called the Boston Dangler.
Oh, man.
No, I'm kidding. Can you imagine, like...
Boston Dangler.
I feel like you should always give serial killers, like, ridiculous names, so when they go to prison, like, things happen to them, right? You know, and then, like, instead of them, like, sending in letters of clues of who they are, they're like, will you please change my name? I don't think the Boston Dangler is a good name to have.
But anyway, that's your name. We dubbed you the Boston Dangler. But why? I don't...
There's got to be ridiculous. There's got to be some fun, like really stupid serial killer names you can think of. If you can think of any, put them in the comments on YouTube. But anyway,
like the Pennsylvania penis. It's like, why would you even name me that? I don't know, because it pisses you off, and you deserve it. You'll forever go down in history as the Pennsylvania penis.
The Georgia cuck.
It doesn't even. Hey, let's go with it. The Georgia cuck. No one's gonna be happy being called the Georgia cuck. Not a single person. You know that piss him off. He's in a cell like, are they really? They just send him the newspaper articles.
Writing letters. I've taken down 15 people, and that's what you call me?
The Georgia cuck? Every newspaper is referring to me as the Georgia cuck. This is not what I wanted. Well, you're famous now. This is the wrong thing.
Right. So this is really called the Boston Strangler.
Okay.
So,
to no surprise of anyone.
From 1962 through January 1964, 13 single women between the ages of 19 and 85 were murdered throughout the Boston area.
That is quite the age gap.
Yeah, Britton, I always hear you say 1985. Is that right? Many people believed that at least 11 of these murders were committed by the same individual because of the similar manner in which each murder was committed. It was believed that the women, who all lived alone, knew the attacker and let him in, or that he disguised himself as a repairman or a delivery man to get the women to voluntarily let him into their apartments. In every case, the victims had been raped, sometimes with foreign objects, and their bodies laid out nude, as if on display for a pornographic snapshot. Death was always due to strangulation through the killer. Sometimes they also used a knife. The ligature, a stocking, pillowcase, whatever, was inevitably, I can't say the word.
Inevitably.
Fuck you. Left around the victim's neck, tied to an exaggerated, ornamental bow. This series of crimes was often referred to as the Silk Stocking Murders, and the sought-after attacker became known as the Boston Strangler.
Boston Dangler. The Boston Bitch.
Boston Dangles. A couple of years before the Silk Stocking Murders began, a series of sex offenses began in the Cambridge, Massachusetts area. A smooth, talking man in his late 20s went door to door looking for young women. If a young woman answered the door, he would introduce himself as a talent scout from a modeling agency looking for new models. If she was interested, he would tell her that he needed to get measurements. Many women expressed interest and allowed him to measure them with his measuring tape.
So this is in the 60s, right? Like, that shit would not fly today.
Yeah.
A random guy shows up, I'm here with the talent agency. Can I measure you?
You just have to change it a little bit, like do some Facebook ads, but then there would be like a link to you.
Yeah. Like, just shows up at the door,
Just
I
a
need to
measuring
measure
tape.
you. Yeah, come on in. Come on in.
Yeah.
Nothing's going to happen.
Okay.
I want to be a model.
Yeah.
You can measure me.
Oh, is that Lil Wayne?
It sounded a lot like Lil Wayne. Is he measuring Lil Wayne? Jesus Christ.
He would then fondle the woman. No, he would.
Woman. The woman.
He would then fondle the women as he took their measurements. Several women contacted the police, and this man was referred to as the Measuring Man. So he has a couple of
What?
he has a couple of nicknames so
The
far. Right?
measuring man. But I think it's kind of interesting that only several women, not every woman.
Yeah, not all of them. You
Like
know?
some of them, like were just like
be
fondled. And he's
embarrassed,
just
you
like,
know?
I mean, yeah.
What if someone was like, "Hey, Britton, we want to put you in an action movie because like you look like a fucking superhero," and then when they start like measuring you, they just cup you.
I'd smack him in the face. Like, you're spending a lot of time in that area, buddy. Just measure and move on,
Just get
please.
measurements. Shut up.
Like, it's just too big. I got to keep
There's
measuring.
nothing there. It's literally
I don't find anything.
concave. All right. In March of 1960, police caught a man breaking into a house. He confessed to the burglary, and without any prompting, he also confessed to being the measuring man. The man's name was Albert Del Salvo. The judge sentenced Del Salvo to 18 months in jail, but he was released after 11 months for good behavior.
Holy God.
Following his release, he began a new crime spree throughout Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, and New Hampshire.
They called him the Connecticut Sniffer. Can I smell your flowers?
During the spree, Del Salvo, while dressed in green, broke into over 400 homes and sexually assaulted over 300 women.
Like, specifically dressing in green every time.
Every time. I don't know why.
It's like playing Kermit the Frog.
Don't say that. Full body Kermit the Frog suit. While police throughout New England were in search of the Green Man, Boston homicide detectives continued their search for the Boston Strangler.
He's just stacking up these nicknames.
Yeah.
The Measure Man, the Green Man, the Boston Strangler.
The
Like,
Dangler.
yeah.
In October of 1964, a young woman who was one of the Green Man's victims came forward to police saying that a man posing as a detective entered her home and sexually assaulted her. From her description of the man, the police were able to identify the man as Albert DeSalvo. A photo of DeSalvo was published in the newspaper, and several women came forward to identify him as their attacker. He was arrested on rape charges and was sent to Bridgewater State Hospital for psychiatric observation, where he befriended convicted murderer George Nassar. It is speculated that the two worked out a deal to split reward money if one of them confessed to being the Boston Strangler.
He's like, it is me, but if you can confess to it, I'll share some of the money.
Think of all the ramen we could buy. Through DeSalvo's ability to describe the murders in accurate detail, Bailey believed that DeSalvo was in fact the Strangler. After hours of questioning, where DeSalvo described murder by murder, the details of his victims' apartments and what they wore, the police were convinced that they had the killer. Despite his confession, there was no physical evidence to link Albert DeSalvo to the Silk Stocking murders. Doubt remained, and police brought the Strangler's one surviving victim, Gertrude Gruen, to the prison to identify the man. She fought off as he attempted to strangle her. To observe her reaction, the police brought two men through the prison lobby. The first was Nassar, and the second was DeSalvo. Gruen said that the second man, DeSalvo, was not the man. However, When she saw the first man, Nassar, she felt there was something upsetting, something frighteningly familiar about that man. Through it all, Del Salvo's wife, family, and friends never believed that he was capable of being the Strangler. Because there was no physical evidence and he did not match witness descriptions, he was never tried in any of the Boston Strangler murders. He was, however, sent to prison for life for the rapes and sexual assaults from the Green Man case. He was sent to Walpole Maximum Security Prison in 1967 to serve his sentence. But 6 years later, he... But,
6 years later.
But 6 years later... Oh, Lord.
Here we go.
But 6 years later, he was stabbed to death in his cell.
Oh.
I heard you were the Boston Dangler.
I heard you were the Green Man.
Dangle this.
Was he wearing green when he was stabbed?
Maybe. After nearly 50 years, no one has ever been charged with the Boston Strangler murders.
What?
In July 2013, the Boston Police Department believed that they had discovered DNA evidence linking Albert DeSalvo to Mary Sullivan, who had been raped and strangled in 1964, the final victim of the Boston Strangler. After taking DNA from DeSalvo's nephew, the Boston police said it was a near certain match to DNA evidence found on Mary Sullivan's body and on a blanket taken from her apartment. Upon this discovery, the court ordered the exhumation of DeSalvo's body. After extracting DNA from DeSalvo's femur and some of his teeth, it was determined that DeSalvo was the man who killed and raped Mary Sullivan.
Those are such intense places to gather DNA from. Like, I'm going to take it from your femur.
Well, think about it. The femur is like your thickest bone in your body, so it's going to retain DNA over time. That's the idea.
I know, but it's
because
just so
DNA
crazy.
has a half-life, so you can't like take it from like flesh or tissue. It has to be like deep in the bone.
I know, but it's like his femur and then his teeth, which are easily accessible.
Teeth are hard though. Teeth and bone are what stays around. And you want the thickest bone or you want the teeth. It makes sense.
We got both. That's what I'm saying.
I mean, you know, I know my bone and teeth. You know. Anyways,
Yeah, you're sounding a lot like a serial killer, bud.
while the case of Mary Sullivan's murder has been closed, the mystery of the Boston Strangler still remains open to speculation. But I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Come on.
It's DeSalvo, for sure.
All right, and that's the Boston Strangler,
Boston Dangler.
the Dangler. He just
Dangle.
dangle around. He do the helicopter.
Okay. All right, on to Michigan for Carl Watts. Now, this one I did have to trim because, holy shit, there was a lot. So we could do a deep dive later if anyone's interested, but we'll get the Cliff Notes version. Carl Eugene Watts was an American serial killer dubbed the Sunday Morning Slasher. Over an 8-year period, he was responsible for the murders of numerous women, and suspected as being the most prolific serial killer in the United States history. Although going to prison for the deaths of 2 women, his victims may have exceeded 100 in total. Let's get into the story of this piece of shit. Carl Watts was born in Killeen, Texas, to Richard Eugene Watts and Dorothy Mae Young on November 7th, 1953. His dad was a private first class in the Army, his mother a kindergarten teacher. 3 days after his birth, the family moved to West Virginia where they grew up, and a year later, the second child, Sharon, was born. The parents had divorced due to an unsatisfactory marriage when Carl was less than 2, leaving his mother to raise him. In 1962, Dorothy remarried to a man named Norman Caesar, who was a mechanic. Together, they had 2 daughters. After that, they moved to Inkster, Michigan, where his mom became a high school art teacher. Carl didn't like his new stepfather, making it difficult to adapt to the changes. Carl recalls being called a mama's boy and was in constant worry about losing his mother's attention. The family would often visit Dorothy's mother in Colwood, where Dorothy was born. It was here that Carl learned how to hunt and skin rabbits with his grandfather, something he really enjoyed. Carl later picked up the nickname Coral, which was the southern pronunciation of his name. Carl had some academic difficulties, struggling with several subjects. However, he still managed to get some decent grades. Carl and his sister contracted meningitis when he was 8, nearly killing him and causing him to be held back, missing the 3rd grade. That was rough, dude. Meningitis at 8 years old.
Yeah, give the kid a break.
Carl was taken to Herman Kiefer Hospital and kept apart from other patients, undergoing several spinal taps. That would hurt.
I mean,
At 8 years old, as a spinal tap, dude?
how many spinal taps have you had?
None.
Do they hurt? I mean,
I've heard it's one of the most painful things you can have.
oof.
Like, legitimately.
The old taparoo.
There were claims that his body temperature was so high that they were concerned with some brain damage. After the illness, his family noted his change in personality, often describing him as bashful, quiet, and introverted. He began struggling with poor memory, and his attention span would drop quickly. Upon returning to school, Carl struggled keeping up with his peers, both because of missing out on a whole year and due to the illness which left him with chronic sleeplessness. He also began having very violent dreams about killing the wicked spirits of women, which were there to interrupt his sleep cycle. Like, he was very specific.
The wicked spirits of women.
Yeah, dude, he was very specific. So he goes further and he says that, so it would come up later in his questioning about killing women, to which he said he wanted to free their spirits because they had evil eyes. So he literally was like, I'm just killing the women because they have evil eyes.
Goddamn eyes.
At the young age of 12, the dreams of torturing and killing girls and young women became a sort of fantasy for Carl. This led to him beginning to stalk girls during his teenage years, with some thinking he may have killed his first victim before the age of 15. His grades were consistently failing, and at the age of 16, he was only able to read at a 4th grade level, which caused severe bullying at school. At 15 years old, Carl was identified as a culprit in the assault of a 26-year-old woman named Joan Gave on June 29, 1969. He was delivering newspapers at the time, knocking on her door. She answered, only to be severely beaten by Carl. He then continued his paper out as if nothing happened. Like, literally, he shows up to deliver newspapers. She opens the door, he batters the shit out of her, and then just goes on his way.
Here's the Washington Post.
God, that's probably his catch thing. That's probably his catchphrase. Here's the Washington Post.
Oh my God.
Jesus, Cleet. What have you done?
That's not appropriate.
This is not for science. Okay. God damn it. Every time, dude, you make the right before I can finish. Joan immediately called police, who apprehended Carl at his home, and he was ordered to receive psychiatric treatment at the Lafayette Clinic in Detroit, which was a mental hospital. During an evaluation, Carl was asked if his dreams and visions had disturbed him in any way. He replied with, "No, I feel better after I have one." He didn't like calling them nightmares because he enjoyed having them. He mentioned that he had assaulted Joan because he felt like beating someone up. That was his whole reasoning. I just felt like beating someone up. During his time there, he was revealed to have a mild intellectual disability with an intelligence quotient of 75, having a delusional thought process with no evidence of psychosis. This was contradicted by a police officer who interrogated Carl, saying he appeared to be very, very intelligent with an excellent memory. His psychiatrist later said that Carl was an impulsive individual who has passive-aggressive orientation to life, struggling for control of strong homicidal impulses. He was labeled as a threat to society, but they hoped he would benefit from outpatient care. He was discharged from the clinic on his 16th birthday, visiting the facility 9 more times for outpatient care. He was eventually diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder. Carl graduated from high school in 1972 at the age of 19, receiving a football scholarship to Lane College in Jackson, Tennessee, even though his grades were shit and he was still using drugs. He claimed that the exercise was an outlet for his suppressed rage. He did well at football and even better with boxing, in which he became a Golden Gloves fighter. His college days were short-lived as he was dismissed after just 3 months for stalking and assaulting women. He was also accused of being a suspect in a violent killing of a female student by several people on campus, which contributed to his expulsion, although there was insufficient evidence to support his involvement. Eventually, he landed at Western Michigan University in Kalamazoo, which is where his violent spree began. His first convicted murders took place when Carl was 20 in 1974. He kidnapped his victims from their homes to torture and eventually kill them. This took place in several different jurisdictions and states, with his victims mainly being thin, attractive white women. His methods were mainly strangulation, stabbing, bludgeoning, and drowning. The ages were anywhere from 14 to 44, and he murdered dozens of women between 1974 and 1982, not being discovered as a serial killer for almost 8 years. Even with the DNA testing capabilities available, it was really hard to connect him as he rarely engaged in sexual acts on his victims, causing authorities to think that his crimes were not sexually motivated. Again, for the sake of time, I'm going to cut really far back on a lot of his crimes. There's so many of them, but he received his nickname the Sunday Morning Slasher, as most of the killings took place on Sunday mornings at roughly 4 a.m. Carl would knock on his victims' doors, and when they answered, would brutally attack them via strangulation, stabbing, hitting, etc. So literally, he would just walk up to people's doors on Sunday, knock on them, and then beat the shit out of them and murder them.
Paper route.
Literally, he was just answering doors and then murdering people. One of his victims was a reporter for the Detroit News who was walking home after a doctor's appointment. Carl attacked her in broad daylight, stabbing her to death 11 times. Carl quite literally was on the prowl, just stabbing women all over the place, out in the open, just walking up to knock on doors. Michelle Mayday, 20 years old at the time, answered a knock on her apartment door on May 23rd, 1982, finding a suspicious man standing there. Unexpectedly, as he had done several times before to other women, he began beating and choking her until she passed out. He entered her bathroom, filled the tub with water, and drowned her while she was still unconscious, then fled the area. Later that day, he attacked Melinda Aguilar and Lori Lister, who shared an apartment together. He broke into the apartment, choking Lister unconscious while she returned home from work. He then went inside to choke Aguilar, who feigned unconscious while he tied her hands behind her back. While Carl hauled Lister upstairs to drown her in the bathtub, which was filling up, Aguilar made an escape out of a window to get help. Lister was saved and Carl was captured. While Carl was being held, investigators started connecting a lot of dots between these other victims. In May of 1982, a plea bargain was brokered that stated Carl would only be charged with burglary with intent to murder if he confessed fully to his crimes, receiving immunity from prosecution on the murder accusations. A 60-year sentence was imposed for this offense. The deal was accepted, and he led detectives to the graves of 3 of his victims. Carl finally acknowledged attacking 19 women, murdering 13 of them. He was sentenced to the agreed 60 years in 1982. However, after serving for a short time, the Texas Court of Appeals ruled that Carl had not been informed that the bathtub he attempted to drown Lori Lister in was considered a deadly weapon. The ruling reclassified him as a nonviolent felon, making him eligible for early release. At the time, Texas law allowed nonviolent felons to have 3 days deducted from their sentence for every 1 day served and in good behavior. Believe that shit?
Texas.
Carl was a model prisoner and could have been released as early as May 9th, 2006. In 2004, Michigan Attorney General Mike Cox appeared on national television asking anyone to come forward with information in the hopes of convicting Watts of murder to prevent his release. Several pieces of information came in matching his description, and although he had immunity in Texas, he didn't in Michigan, and the confessions were brought into evidence. With all the new evidence, Carl was sentenced to life without parole on September 13th.
Get him.
He died of prostate cancer on September 21st, 2007 in a Jackson, Michigan hospital. Overall, he claimed to have murdered upwards of 80 women, but didn't want to be seen as a mass murderer. Police considered him to be involved with the killing of over 100 women, which would make him the most prolific serial killer in American history.
Damn.
There you go.
All right, we'll move to Minnesota.
Minnesota.
And we'll talk about Billy Richard Glaze.
Glaze?
Glaze.
Like a glazed donut.
Yeah.
It's going to be the, okay, it's the Minnesota glazed donut, eh?
Just another glazed donut. Billy Richard Glaze, also known as Jesse Sitting Crow and Butcher Knife Billy,
Whoa.
was a convicted serial killer whose guilt had been questioned since the discovery of DNA evidence which excluded Glaze and implicated another man. He was suspected of murdering at least 50 women.
Holy shit.
And boasted to police about killing another 20 more. However, in later interviews, Glaze claimed to be innocent. He first appeared as a suspect in the 1986-87 murders of 3 Native American women in Minneapolis. A waitress gave the authorities his name. Information provided by a girlfriend led investigators to seek him in New Mexico, and he was arrested driving under the influence on August 31st, 1987, for a parole violation from a Texas rape conviction in 1974. Arresting officers discovered a bloody shirt, a crowbar, and a nightstick in Glaze's truck. Hair samples from the crowbar were what convicted him of 3 counts of first-degree murder, with parole eligibility 52 years later. At sentencing, Glaze maintained his innocence. In 2009, the Innocence Project conducted DNA testing on a victim's rape kit. It didn't match Glaze, but did match another Minnesota man, a convicted rapist. More testing in 2014 conducted on a cigarette butt found near the body of another victim was a match to the same man. Despite dozens of tests of many pieces of evidence from the 3 crime scenes, none were a match for Glaze. Glaze's attorney filed a motion for a retrial on the basis of both the DNA results and unreliable eyewitnesses, one of whom had since recanted, and another who had claimed to have witnessed over 60 murders during his time in prison.
Jesus Christ, dude.
In response to this, the Minneapolis Police Department and Hennepin County Attorney's Office are reinvestigating the case. On December 22nd, 2015, Billy Glaze died at the age of 72 with stage 4 lung cancer.
So wait.
So he may have not have done it. Might be the gentleman who was matched on the DNA
So
test.
there's 2 potential people on this one.
Oh, yeah, I guess so.
For Minnesota, huh? Okay. Well, let's round things out with Mississippi. Glenn Rogers. Glenn Edwards Rogers, also known as the cross-country killer or the Casanova killer, is an American serial killer who was convicted of 2 murders and a suspect in numerous others throughout the United States.
Imagine if they called him the cross-eyed dumbass.
Yeah. I think it's a better name.
Like, you go to jail. Like, oh, you were that
You're the
guy?
cross-eyed dumbass. What the fuck did you just say? What did you just call me? Oh, you're sharing a cell with the Boston Dangler. Just create one prison for all the serial killers, just giving them goofy-ass names like that.
And then have them fight each
just
other.
see what-
Have
Just see what chaos ensues. Yeah. Yeah. He's also considered a possible alternative suspect to O.J. Simpson in the 1994 murders of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman, although as of 2022, none of these have led to formal charges. That one I was shocked with, like that he's an alternative to the O.J. Simpson murders. I was like, what?
I mean, OJ did it.
Okay. Anyway, he was featured on the FBI 10 Most Wanted Fugitives list after his crime spree. So let's jump into this asshole. Oh, wait, that sounded really weird.
Ew.
Let's we'll talk about this guy.
Jump right
Let's
into
jump
this
right into
ass.
this asshole. You're the Boston asshole. Rogers was born and raised in Hamilton, Ohio, as one of 7 children born to Edna and Claude Rogers. 7 fucking kids, dude. He was expelled from his junior high school before the age of 16, and sometime after that, his 14-year-old girlfriend, Deborah Ann Nix, got knocked up by someone else.
Ooh.
They married, having another child in 1981, but in 1983, Nix filed for divorce, claiming physical abuse. Authorities suspected that Rogers had stabbed or strangled an elderly man from Ohio in 1993, along with 4 women in California, Mississippi, Florida, and Louisiana. His original claim was that he had murdered close to 70 people, later recanting the statement saying he was joking and had not committed any murders at all. He's like, yeah, I murdered 70 people.
It was a joke.
Oh, I'm just kidding. I didn't murder anyone.
When I led him to the bodies, I didn't think they would be there.
He's like, why am I here again? I didn't murder anybody. No, I'm good. I don't kill people. Okay. On January 10th, 1994, police discovered the remains of 71-year-old Mark Peters, who was a retired electrician and veteran. The body was found in a cabin that belonged to Glenn Rogers' family in Beattyville, Kentucky. Peters had taken Rogers in, allowing him to live in his home before October of 1993, when Mark Peters was reported missing, along with his car and other valuable items such as antiques, guns, and a collection of coins. Rogers had also disappeared, which led his brother Clay to tell authorities to search the cabin for clues, where they found Peters' skeleton bound to a chair and covered by a pile of furniture. He's like, I know how to hide this thing. I'll just throw a couple couches on top of it.
Yeah,
Why the
that's what I
fuck
would
not?
do. Put a couch over it.
It's like, you have a couch standing straight up. Yep, that's feng shui.
Leave it alone.
Don't touch my couch. On September 28th, 1995, a 33-year-old mother of three named Sandra Gallagher was unfortunate to cross paths with Rogers at a bar in Van Nuys, California. The next day, Gallagher's body was found, strangled and badly burned in her car near Rogers' apartment. It was alleged by the authorities that after murdering Gallagher, Rogers moved to Mississippi, Louisiana, and Florida, killing a woman in each state. He's like, yeah, I just want to take one from each state. Why not? Linda Price was the next victim of Rogers. She was in her 30s and had red hair and was found dead in a bathtub. Price and Rogers met in a beer tent at the Mississippi State Fair, and her sister recalls Price saying, "Ain't he good looking?" several times throughout the night. Price and Rogers shared an apartment for a short while in Jackson. The last time Price's sister saw her alive was the night before Halloween in 1995 when they went trick-or-treating at her apartment, to which she did not answer the door. On November 5th, 1995, Tina Marie Cribbs was seen leaving the Showtown bar in Gibsonton, Florida, with Rogers. A bartender told the police that Rogers bought Cribbs and her friends some drinks, later asking Cribbs for a ride. He's like, I'll buy you a beer if you'll give me a ride. 2 days later, a member of the cleaning crew at the Tampa 8 Inn discovered Cribbs' body in a bathtub, and much like Price, had been stabbed in the chest and buttocks. A clerk at the motel told police that Rogers had actually arrived at the motel days earlier. On November 5th, he paid for an extra night, asking for his room not to be cleaned.
Yeah.
Like, how many times do you think they get that request?
God, there's just
Please
so
don't
much
clean my
blood
room.
in it.
Yeah, don't clean my room, please.
Do you
Don't
guys
do it.
like sell Lysol wipes?
Yeah, I might have had an accident. Don't clean my room.
I need extra towels.
I'd be like, we're doing double cleaning today, is what you're telling me.
Extra towels.
The clerk saw him put his belongings into a white Ford Festiva. The next day, Cribbs' wallet was found at a rest area in North Florida, and when dusted for fingerprints, they matched those in the motel room that belonged to Rogers. On November 13th, Rogers was arrested while driving Cribbs' car in Kentucky, claiming that she had let him borrow it, and that she had been alive when he left. Yeah, it's super credible.
Yeah, she was totally alive.
Totally alive. And don't clean my room.
Maybe she deserved to die. I don't know.
It was a 13-mile chase, which resulted in a roadblock to stop Rogers. Ed Robinson, a Kentucky police trooper, shot out the back tires with a shotgun, but it didn't stop Rogers. Sergeant Joey Barnes eventually rammed his patrol car into the stolen vehicle, spinning Rogers off the highway into a ditch. This was all filmed by a local TV news crew.
Yes, cops. Tell me it was cops.
Andy Giles Sutton, a known acquaintance of Rogers, was found on November 9th, 1995. Her body slashed on a punctured waterbed in her apartment in Bossier City, Louisiana. Rogers was scheduled to be executed on Valentine's Day in Florida, 1999. He immediately appealed to the Florida Supreme Court, claiming that the state had not presented enough evidence to support the charges. He also made the argument that the trial court should have granted the defense's motions for a mistrial, as a witness was allowed to testify about a misdemeanor for which Rogers was convicted in California. His appeal was delayed until March of 2001 and was ultimately denied. In April of 2005, Rogers filed another appeal, which was also denied in 2011. That was his last appeal. During a lengthy correspondence in 2009 between Rogers and criminal profiler Anthony Miolis, Rogers wrote and created paintings detailing his involvement with the murders. During a prison meeting with the two, he claimed that O.J. Simpson had hired him to break into Nicole Brown Simpson's house to steal some expensive jewelry, telling him, "You may have to kill the bitch."
What?
Yeah. Rogers' family claimed that he told them he had been working for Nicole in 1994, making verbal threats about her to them. Rogers spoke to a criminal profile later about the Goldman-Simpson murders, providing details about the crime scene, making remarks that he had been hired by OJ to steal a valuable pair of earrings and potentially murder her. So there you go. So he may or may not have been involved, if you believe that, but that's going to wrap up our midway point of all the serial killers.
Halfway done.
halfway done. So thank everybody for joining us here. If you have been following the whole series, thank you very much. If you've been following us from the start, thank you also. And a huge thank you to our paid supporters of the show, Claytor, Lord of Soup, Curtis and Lara, Jackson, Modelo Time, Mothman, Devin, Conklin family, and Lou. Your constant support is super helpful. We're getting really, really close to getting video on the show. And next week, please join us as we wrap up the iceberg that we've been absolutely crushing.
You got to wrap it up.
Yeah, wrapping up the iceberg. And over to Cleve for our YouTube stuff.
Yeah, we're looking to get 500 subs on YouTube before we go to the Clown Motel. So,
in order to go to the Clown Motel.
In order, yes. If you're listening to us on YouTube, please like, share, and subscribe, as it really helps us get us out there. And as always, thank you for entering the abyss.
Until next time.